Yes, of course. I, by definition, European. If you ask me where I'm from, the only coherent answer I can give you that I'm from Europe, because I'm a Polish national, a Dutch citizen, Italian resident, and British taxpayer. So you can imagine that I feel very much at home in Europe. This morning I read for the purpose Václav Havel's speech in European Parliament in 1994. And he said something very interesting. He said he never really thought through why he felt European. It came to him naturally, even though he was, like myself, living under a regime which was largely responsible for the divisions of the continent. But we always thought that we are part of European culture on the other side, east of this wall, so to speak. And maybe the most striking realizations of what the contemporary Europe is was during my first trip to the western part of Europe. And I went by night train from Warsaw to Amsterdam. And the moment we moved from dark East Berlin to enlightened West Berlin was really shocking. And I will spare you all the hassle we had on different borders. But this was the empire of darkness and an empire of light, which struck me a lot when I thought, what is Europe proper at the time? Well, there's no one single moment. We had a lot of ups and downs in European history. My two emotional negative experiences, one came during the refugee crisis, which was for me shocking since I'm a permanent immigrant myself. The way some countries treated these poor refugees, fleeing poverty and war to a large extent caused by our actions or benign neglect, was really shocking for me. And the other experience, maybe not on such a dramatic human scale, but nevertheless for my identity rather important, was the moment we learned about the results of the Brexit referendum. I remember a very emotional meeting in European Studies Center where this pretty experienced international club was really shocked by the decision taken by the British electorate. The best moment for somebody like myself was when the government of Tadeusz Mazowiecki has been sworn in Poland, which meant that Poland is free, so Europe is open and free in due time. So this was for me a very emotional experience, although I was not at the time in Poland, but somewhere near Cortona in Tuscany. But I heard on the radio with a lot of problems, but I could hear his speech, acceptance speech, which was very emotional. And I thought, well, this is Europe at its best. What the EU has done for me personally is probably the fact that I could work in different countries without much hassle. But I wish there would be even less hassle than there is. I still fear that you always fall in some bureaucratic trap which you cannot overcome. So in this respect, I would hope there would be more Europe rather than less. But still, on the daily life, it certainly improve quality of work and life of those who didn't just stick to one place. I constantly commuted between 3, 4 countries over the last 3 or even 4 decades. And without the European Union, it would be much more difficult. I remember how it was when I didn't have EU passport, right? Uh, it was tough. Therefore, I have so much sympathy for those who still don't have EU passport and try to live in the EU. And I'm sometimes appalled by the way they are treated. Well, there are many things which I would like to see in Europe, but probably one of the things I would like to see most is to see Europe finally achieving something what Massimo Cacciari called archipelago of spaces, which is not Europe of states, but Europe of spaces, a network of difference, a mosaic of overlapping diversities. I always believe that there is more to Europe than just nation states and the EU as such. I always thought that Europe could be also about republic of letters of people like myself who work in universities, but also of urban networks, which are more and more pronounced in Europe, yet do not have access to decision making and resources. And of course, Europe of regions, because those regions are very much important. When you ask me where I was born, I always say in Silesia, where there's a strong identity, regional one. And this is how I would like to see Europe moving to. So neither to nation states or Europe of states, neither to Europe of states nor to European superstates, but this archipelago of spaces, which gives opportunities to versus territorial units and versus professional and functional arrangements. The whole point is that the discussions we had for most of different stages of European integration focus on this dilemma: do we want to delegate more powers to European center away from nation states, or is actually European center an agency of nation states created for them to prosper, or to, as my former colleague and friend Alan Milward in his book once quoted that actually European integration has rescued nation states, and therefore this is an organization owned by states and should work on the service. I never believed in neither one or the other idea, partly because I do not believe that nation states can return to the maybe even mythical glory. They are increasingly dysfunctional in many areas where they are supposed to perform best. At the same time, I always thought that they will never delegate too much power to European center, because this would mean their collective suicide, and since they control the organization, they are not going to do this. So the way I would envisage is, if you cannot move forward, up, you cannot move down, try to move sideways and allowed other actors to take part in our deliberations and decision making. And I mentioned a second ago, for instance, cities, regions, but also organizations of entrepreneurs, associations of entrepreneurs, business associations, but also even more so non-governmental organizations, because they play extremely important role today. If you think about combating poverty, for instance, or climate change, do you look at your nation states, or you look to NGOs to do something for you here? And all of the same about cities. When you think about your daily life, where to find a job, where to find a school, where to find a hospital, you are dependent on cities, not on states. So I always believe that you should give those other actors more opportunity to contribute to European politics, and you can do it step by step. Let's start with the structures we have. Let's add a second chamber to European Parliament, where those cities, regions, and NGOs, business associations will have a say. You see, even with business associations, I prefer that they argue their case publicly in European Parliament than lobby secretly in the corridors of powers of Brussels. Transparency is a big problem in the EU. So, so you see, this is more or less my vision of a better union. And then you can go step by step. You can give more powers to regulatory agencies which are spread all over Europe and reduce the power of the center in Brussels. So it doesn't look more or less like basically unaccountable, non-transparent, and detached from citizen center of power, which people look at with more and more suspicion these days. Look, there are more than 30,000 lobbies in Brussels, and I know some of them, and I can tell you that they are making good money there. So, of course, this is the business which pays off, but it is not well regulated and is not sufficiently transparent. Various interventions of European ombudsmen urging members of parliament and the commission and council to keep record of their meetings with lobbyists have been very recently. I understand there was an agreement that there was agreement that they should do this, but it is still not mandatory. So you have a situation that various important decision makings in Brussels can meet with lobbyists, and they don't even have to keep record of this, let alone reveal what was the topic of conversations. We are talking about billions of euros going through pharmaceutical companies, for instance, today. Because, as you know, we are very much dependent on pharmaceutical companies. We are talking about a car industry. You know, I'm myself involved in associations trying to help consumers of diesel cars of Volkswagen who are still not compensated for the products they bought, you know, because it just defined any environmental regulations through devices which you cannot call differently but cheating. So why I'm saying about those things, that I believe you cannot have democracy without openness. And of course, if the government is further away from citizens, as it is unavoidable in Brussels, because the government which is closest to you is a local government, not even national, and certainly not European. You have to pay more attention rather than less to transparency, and this is not going very well in the European Union. We are making progress, but I would like to see much more radical reforms in this respect. Integration was always based on the principle that members are democratic. And there were efforts in early years, you know, of integration to reduce EU to kind of economic institution only. So when Spain under General Franco tried to sign an association agreement with the European communities, there were politicians opposing this, but there were also officials, I will not mention the name, who were arguing there is nothing something like a fascist banana. So they say we can trade with Franco Spain because democracy doesn't enter a trade discussion. No, but this position has been defeated. The EC on because of the pressure of the at the time it was called still the Parliamentary Assembly, but more even so because of intellectuals, newspapers, and NGOs uh, opposing the idea of rewarding Franco regime with trade concessions with the EC. They crystallize their positions. You can be only a member if you are democratic. And it makes a lot of sense, because how can you make safe business in a country where courts are politicized, where the prime minister of a country tell you, as in today's interview, is that courts are dominated by the oppositions and he cannot allow that. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Uh, you cannot invest money and trade with a country where you don't know whether if there is somebody acts against the agreement made. You don't have a judicial system independent enough to defend your rights. So it is not only the questions of democracy, it's also the questions of all acquis communautaire and the single market, which is, the most pronounced part of European bodies of laws. In other words, it is not only a matter of principle that European integration is only about uh, bringing together states which are democratic, but it is also that you cannot have healthy economic relationship without the rule of law and democracy. And I frankly do not understand why, for instance, Viktor Orban could keep his cronies in power for so long, to some extent, for the EU money which Hungary was receiving without any strings attached. Look, British historian John Eliot once said that Europe is a mental construct born of the conjunction of memory with aspiration. In other words, there's nothing like natural frontier of Europe. The treaty says only European countries can apply, but what does it mean? Turkey was found eligible to apply for EU membership, but geographical, culturally, there is a big discussions within Turkey itself, not just within member states of the EU, such as France, whether Turkey is indeed European state. I actually think it is, but there are those borderline cases which with identity in particular, and the concept of Europe is about identity in the first place. It depends how you feel. If you feel European, you cannot tell to somebody, no, I don't look at you as European. So I believe that there is nothing like the current border of the EU does not necessarily correspond with cultural or geographic Europe. And this means that if other countries meet conditions which are basically that they are democratic and they are able to absorb regulations of internal market, and also they are able to adopt the body of laws, not just in the letter but in spirit, then they should become members. But of course, these criteria are not sufficiently political, and politics went different direction in recent years. Many people have a second thought whether the Eastern enlargement was such a good idea. and and enlargement, particularly in the Balkans, has been put on ice. We know how torturous was the process of even having formal discussions with a country which called itself Macedonia, because some member states raised objections. So uh, at the end of the day, I believe that enlargement was the best foreign policy EU ever had, because it managed to export stability and prosperity through the promise of the membership. And a lot of countries became prosperous and democratic exactly in anticipation of EU membership. They made sacrifices which otherwise they wouldn't make. But unfortunately, it looks like there will not be new enlargements in the years to come. And because, in my view, wrongly, the idea is that too many members generate too much diversity, which the EU is unable to digest with its rather old-fashioned institutional system. Well, this is a long discussions whether there is evidence for that. I believe that the reasons why we do not delegate more powers to to the European Center lies not so much in Tallinn or Ljubljana, but in Paris and Berlin, uh, because those friends of European federal states, they could well start with Franco-German closer alliance, and if this would be successful, others would join. But maybe it is because they don't listen to what I said to you earlier. They believe that the only alternative to nation states is European state, and this doesn't work with ever more members with different priorities, and with a system which gives them the veto right uh, on some crucial matters, as we have experienced last December with the Hungarian and Polish threat of veto of very important recovery fund. Well, unity is a very vague concept, so to speak, because the absolute unity you can get only authoritarian polities. Most of polities prosper because they are diversified internally, and the role of political institution is to mediate those differences and even conflicts. So I don't believe in unity understood as a kind of one view on everything. And I mean, the liberal world doesn't work this way. The liberal way is about creating opportunities to mediate conflicts, to deliberate various issues, and taking decisions through bargaining and deliberation, rather and you arrive to some common decisions, but not necessarily concerning all member states. I never believed that we need all member states for all issues to have a voice, because for me it's obvious that maritime countries such as Spain has more interest in maritime policy than a country like Hungary, which doesn't even have an access to the sea, although it was run for some years by an admiral without a fleet. So what I want to say is that I'm not particularly swayed by the whole idea of European unity. I rather believe in the process which allowed us to take common decisions and accommodating diverse interests. And sometimes we need to have a common stance, but I don't think on everything is necessary. And you know, those those the common stance taken on the basis of a consensus promotes the lowest common denominator, which is not optimal in rational terms, and usually makes things worse rather than better. So I think we have to be selective when it comes to our ambitions to be united, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a common sense of direction, an agreement of values we support. Without this, we we cannot have a community of any sort. But you see, when we talk about agreement of such values like freedom and equality, there's no one interpretations of those values, and they can be very well in conflict. So we have to understand that this is not something what you can do through decree or managerial engineering. It is more about the process of having opportunity to discuss, not just between leaders of states, but between our respective citizens. And then procedures to mediate differences and conflicts. We are far away from this. And each time we achieve unity, what like with the fiscal compact, it is being forced. It is really being forced by at the time Sarkozy and Merkel, or we have in other cases, like in the case of European Constitution, a product which is not appealing because it exactly reflects those diverse interests trying to reach lowest common denominator, and you get something what the Italian call né carne né pesce, which is neither fish nor meat.